Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fastest growing, the largest, the most active meetup and community, global community that started in New York City more than 15 years ago and then has gone viral. Organizational design, product centricity, business agility, aka large scale Scrum. Today we have two very special guests. Both of them represent the Hawley Truxwell um, uh, attorneys firm. The gentlemen are Brad Frazer and Jacob Downies. Brad is the chair of the firm's intellectual property and internet practice group. In addition to emphasizing and focusing on all facets of internet law, intellectual property, and information technology law, he also helps clients with related transactional work and litigation. Brad is a published novelist and has also written extensively for national legal publications and law blogs. He's also a frequent speaker on internet, intellectual property, and computer law topics, and he's a regular guest lecturer at Bowie State University on those subjects. And his companion in today's presentation is Jacob Downies. He's an associate in Hawley Truxwell Litigation, Insurance, and Employment Practice Groups in Boise. Jacob received his JD from Notre Dame Law School in 2024 and went on to serve as the law clerk to the Honorable Chief Justice Sir Richard Bevin of the Idaho Supreme Court. During law school, he completed the 2023 Hawley Truxwell Summer Associate Program, where he drafted motions, pleadings, and responses to charges of discrimination before the Idaho Human Rights Commission. Without any further ado, I would like to pass the baton over to the speakers. With that, Brad and Jacob, please take it away. Thank you once again for doing this for our community, and hopefully we're going to have a fruitful and productive discussion.
Well, thank you, Gene, for that wonderful introduction. It's always nice to be with your meetup group. This is the second or third one of these I've done for you, Gene. And Jacob's first, but we're so happy to join with you and your group today. As Gene said, my name is Brad Frazer. I'm a partner in a law firm in Boise, Idaho called Hawley Truxwell. And with me is my law partner, Jacob Downs. He also practices with me here in Boise, Idaho. And we are grateful to spend some time with you together today to talk about artificial intelligence and HR, human resources. I am an intellectual property and AI lawyer. Jacob is an AI and HR lawyer, so we're covering all of the disciplines today. So we'll begin with some questions and answer, a little bit of interaction between Jacob and me, and then we'll ask Jacob to take you through a slide deck that hopefully will have a lot of good high-level information about artificial intelligence and HR. We don't need to tell this group what AI is and how it affects your practice and your lives on a daily basis. That is assumed. But today we want to specifically look at the issue of artificial intelligence in the realm of human resources departments and the employment-employer relationship. So with that, let me introduce you to Jacob. Jacob, you are an employment law lawyer.
I am.
And that means that there are two kinds of employment law lawyers, Jacob, as you know. There are those that sue employers and those that defend employers. Both have a useful role in society. Which one are you, Jacob? Do you represent disgruntled employees, or do you represent big, important employers and HR departments?
So we represent employers.
Right. And that's an important distinction, right? Because as a function of your representing employers, they're the ones who are going to more likely have the AI questions and issues.
That's correct, yes.
So as a function in your practice, then, do you represent large companies with HR questions? Would you get a call from a client, a large client with an HR question like, can we fire this person, or how do we do a RIF, reduction in force? Are those the types of things that you do?
Yeah, so we often get calls from employers who are having questions about these big questions that they have: reduction in force, paid time off policy. That's a big one. And then termination specific decisions.
Always comes up. And so hopefully, Gene, your audience will find some value specifically because Jacob brings a wealth of experience as an employment law lawyer here. So again, that's why the intersection of AI and HR is so important. Jacob, are you finding that your clients are beginning to use artificial intelligence in their HR departments?
Clients are using artificial intelligence. And if they're not yet, they're being asked to.
That's interesting. Are they being forced to? I mean, are they in a regulatory environment that might mandate the use of AI, or is it more voluntary, or is it, as the saying goes, is it just FOMO? They don't want to be left out because they think everybody's using AI in HR.
I think it's FOMO. As you know, AI is kind of the talk of the town right now. And if it can increase efficiency, if it can help make decisions, people don't want to be left out.
You know, Jacob, as you know, as a member of this law firm, we're dealing with those issues just in terms of the legal use of AI. Every day I get 5 emails from an AI vendor asking if they can meet or talk to me and sell our law firm AI tools. So I'm assuming that the same thing is happening in the HR departments. Is that your sense?
That's my sense, yes.
Okay. Have you seen any particular AI tools sort of float to the top in terms of adoption with HR departments?
I think the major one is using AI to filter and screen candidates for employment. If you get 1,000 applications for one position, a HR department might use artificial intelligence to filter that list of 1,000 candidates down to something more manageable and then present that list to the HR manager.
And, you know, that's what AI is very good at, is data management, right? It's analyzing a large body of data. And so I can see that would be a useful tool. Is it legal, Jacob, for them to do that? For example, for some odd reason I happen to know, Gene, you may know about this. There's a New York City, not New York State. There's a New York City hiring law that says you can't use AI in HR in hiring decisions. New York City, I don't know if you knew that, Gene. So is there anything like that you're aware of on more of a federal level?
I don't think there's anything like that on the federal level. Different states are taking different approaches, different cities even. And so it's really going to depend largely on where the employer is located.
Right. So what are your thoughts on advising a client when it says, Jacob, a client HR department calls you and says, Jacob, what can I tell my employees about the use of AI? I know, let me start with this question. Jacob, have you been asked to write and have you prepared AI usage policies for employers?
I've not prepared an AI usage policy yet, though I think employers would be wise to start drafting those.
What are some of the benefits that you might see to having a really robust AI usage policy in your environment, in your employment environment?
Sure. So I think the benefits of a policy are that it kind of sets the guidelines for everybody who's using AI. For HR managers who are using AI in making decisions, for the employees who are maybe using AI to help generate work product or revise something that they've drafted. A robust AI policy can set those guidelines and manage the expectations and ensure that the employer treats employees consistently.
Isn't that the key, though? Consistent, non-discriminatory treatment, right? And I assume that not only affects all aspects of the employment-employer relationship, but in particular AI usage. Jacob, can an employer, and maybe this is in your slide deck, I know you have a deck for us here in a moment, may an employer simply tell an employee it may not use AI?
I would think in general, yes, an employer can generally tell employees what they can and can't do.
It's a private environment unless it's a government situation, right?
Right.
But as a general rule, a private employer, tell me, you're the employment lawyer, can a private employer essentially set the metes and bounds, of that employment relationship, including use or non-use of AI? That seems right.
Sure. Yeah. So long as it's not discriminatory, the private employer can generally set the rules of the road, so they say.
So if we have an employment AI usage policy and it says don't use AI, and the employee gets caught using AI, do you think those could be grounds for termination?
That could be grounds for termination if it's set forth in a policy and the employee knows about it in advance.
So the keys would be a written policy and having the employee know about it in advance as a general matter.
As a general rule, yes.
Okay, well, that's a really good introduction, Jacob. With that, if you're ready, why don't we turn it over to you and let you run us through that deck that you prepared?
Sure. Thank you, Brad. And thank you, Gene, again for having us this morning. So first off, I just want to highlight how artificial intelligence is being used in the workplace. Employees are using AI to maximize their efficiency in certain tasks, and employers are using artificial intelligence throughout the employment relationship. And we're going to kind of get into some of these. So we're going to start first with the employees. So I found this study. I thought it was really interesting on how employees are using AI on the job. Generally, they're using it to search for information, write or draft text, generate ideas, and summarize information. And these numbers are quite large. 37% are using it to get technical help. So AI usage it's happening. It's not, something in the future. It's not something that people are just talking about. It's happening.
Jacob, do you find your statistics tell us?
Andy, I'm good.
Jacob, do your statistics tell us how much of that AI usage is rogue, and how versus how much is authorized by the employer?
So as we'll see, many employers don't have AI policies. And so it's kind of, these workers are just doing it.
Right.
And I think that's because it's so new.
All right.
It's been happening. Claude has been out there.
Right.
Chat GPT has been out there. The AI usage is still relatively new for the workers.
Now, Gene, we are getting some errant audio from some source. I don't know whether it's one of our participants or if someone's answering a call, but you might mention, Gene, to everybody mute your mics, because at this end, we are getting some errant audio, just FYI. Okay, Jacob, back to you.
So another thing I found interesting, this same study, this census study, said that 25% of employees say that AI saves less than an hour of time. And so we think about, AI, is it gonna reduce jobs? Is it gonna, how efficient will AI make us? A good chunk of people say it saves less than an hour of time. I found that
an hour per day?
Per day or per task. Found it interesting.
Maybe some of the promises of AI have been oversold.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
So that's how employees are using it. Let's look at how employers are using it. So really, they're using it across the employment relationship. I've cited a case here, Mobley versus Workday Inc., and this is a case out of California. And Workday has this AI tool that employers use to filter and screen job candidate applicants.
Oh, that's right. That sounds fun.
And they've been sued because one worker said that the AI screening was producing discriminatory results. It may have sent the HR manager only candidates under a certain age or of a certain race. And really what this case shows us is that employers are responsible for their AI usage. They can't just point the finger at whatever tool they're using and say, oh, well, we use them. So
let's talk about that. You also are a litigator.
I am.
As am I. And so we automatically, when we hear facts like that, Jacob, we automatically think, one, who's going to get sued? Everybody's going to get sued. The employer is going to get sued, and probably the AI vendor, right? Because plaintiffs' lawyers sue everybody. You and I both know that. So on that fact pattern, if the employer got sued, what would it do in terms of its defense? I mean, I'm thinking the first thing you do is you look at your contract with the AI vendor and hopefully look for some type of indemnification. Because the basic theory, I think, doesn't it sound in negligence that you were negligent in your use of the AI tool was negligent and discriminatory?
Yeah, so there may be a negligence cause of action. I think in the employment world, we have, it's under Title VII, and the employee may be able to file a disparate impact claim, which is when the employer has a neutral policy on its face, right? Maybe they're using AI and they say, well, we use it to screen every candidate. But if it produces discriminatory results, the prospective candidate may be able to say, hey, this neutral tool that you're using is producing a disparate impact on job candidates.
Now, I don't want to steal your thunder from later in your deck, but we are dealing with federal laws here. There's a robust body of federal law, right, that protects employees.
Correct.
In this context. So clearly, federal laws protective of employees, anti-discrimination laws, all that stuff, Title 7? Is that
Title 7, correct? 7? Yeah. And each state has their own equivalent of it, or a substantially similar version.
Oh.
Some may be more protective.
As we say, a little Title 7.
Yes.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
And we're here in Idaho. I'm sure every state has something similar. Does Idaho have a little Title 7?
Yeah. So we have the Idaho Human Rights Act that generally protects employees to the same extent that Title 7 does at the federal level.
So it would not be surprising for our audience to find that not only are there federal laws implicated by AI usage and potential discrimination, but little federal laws, state AI laws or HR laws that are implicated.
That's correct.
Are you aware of any of those laws that were originally designed just to prohibit discrimination in the workplace, right? Protected class, whatever. Do any of those laws now specifically talk about AI, or is the courts just sort of extrapolated from the body of law and said, we're going to apply it to an AI case?
So I think both of those are true. I think courts are taking these existing laws, Title VII, state equivalents, and they're looking at these AI tools to see if these AI tools and the employer's usage of them is producing discriminatory results. However, other states that maybe have proactive legislatures are passing laws specifically, like you mentioned, New York City. I know Illinois also has one as well. They're passing laws setting certain rules for AI usage in job applicants or interviewing.
So, Jacob, I have a favorite saying. It's this: it's all academic until you get sued, which is true. It really is all academic until you get sued. So if a client were to call you and say, Jacob, I want to roll out a bulletproof AI usage policy so I'm not going to get sued for AI usage, you're going to say, well, I can't do that, or I can't stop you from getting sued. But what would you advise that client in terms of best practices so that if they do get sued, they have some defenses?
Yeah, so I think best practices for having an AI policy, I think you'd want to audit your AI policy or audit your AI tool regularly, right? If you're using AI to screen applicants and send the hiring manager a list of qualified applicants, you'd want to audit that tool and audit the results to make sure, are the candidates reflective of your workforce that you have currently? Are the candidates reflective of the community as a whole? What are the demographics of the list that's being sent to the hiring manager? I think that can go a long way in preventing some of these things, because if you know ahead of time, you can maybe course correct before that problem gets bigger.
And what are you advising your clients, Jacob, about training? I always tell my clients, train your employees on my practice areas, which are IP and AI. What are your current recommendations about regular employee training? What if HR pulls everybody into a room once a quarter, right? Or sets up a Zoom or a webinar and says, okay, here's your quarterly AI training. I mean, it seems like a good idea, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I think trainings in this area would be very beneficial. A lot of studies that I saw in preparing for this have said that employees don't really receive training on AI. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's because, HR is still grappling with it themselves and trying to figure out how to sort through that. But I think training would be very beneficial for both the employer to set those guidelines and to set those expectations, and the employees to know what uses of AI are acceptable and what are not.
Good. I don't mean to have derailed you there. Let's go back.
You have it. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to just kind of highlight AI use throughout the different stages of the employment relationship, right? So we've already talked about this a little bit, but I think the biggest one is recruitment and hiring, right? So AI can give candidates targeted job ads based on their social media profiles and their activity. AI is also being used to screen resumes and look for keywords, look for certain experience, and then we'll send those to a human HR manager to review. Another interesting one is that AI is being used to analyze recorded video interviews. So when you interview for a position, if that's recorded, that recording may get submitted to AI and have AI analyze, would you be a good fit for the position? It's kind of interesting.
What about background screening? A lot of employers do background screening, right?
Right.
And drug testing and all that stuff.
Right.
You see any AI being used in, like, for example, could I just take a candidate's photo and run it through AI and generate a background screen? Is it that evolved yet?
See, that I don't know. I may defer to you as the intellectual property lawyer, but
You do actually a pretty good job of that. I don't know how accurate it would be, but Claude would give it a shot.
Well, and I think that's the danger of using it, right? If you ask Claude for a background check on somebody, if it manufactures or hallucinates, let's say, a criminal conviction, that's a big deal for that job candidate because they may not be considered for the job based on the hallucination from an AI tool.
If the AI hallucinates, like Claude gave you a false positive on a conviction, right?
Right.
And that person is not hired, is that conduct that might cause the employer to get sued? Is that a Title VII thing? Is that a thing?
I don't know if it would be Title VII. You can imagine maybe in circumstances where if the employer is doing it and it's doing it a lot, maybe then there could be a Title VII claim.
Right.
But certainly there is some risk there to the employer for using a tool that maybe might hallucinate something about the candidate's background.
Interesting. And as you and I both know, as AI practitioners, no AI vendor gives you a full warranty against hallucination.
Right.
I'll just look at the camera and say that again. No AI vendor gives you a full warranty against hallucinations. You can take that to the bank. Okay. So use it at your own risk, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the EEOC, so the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that's the federal administrative body that tries to prevent workplace discrimination. They have noted that employers bear responsibility for discrimination stemming from the AI technology they use. So the EEOC has issued guidance to those employers saying, you can't just point the finger at Claude. You've got to take ownership of that too. So that's hiring. Another interesting one is that employers are using artificial intelligence to monitor their employees in the workplace. They may monitor how long it takes to complete a task, track your online activity, or what's going on your screen. One study found that about 74% of employers are using tracking tools to monitor employees.
Well, I'm not an employment lawyer, but that seems like an egregious invasion of privacy. Do employees have any rights to privacy in the workplace, Jacob?
So employees may have some rights to privacy. It depends on the employer. But a lot of employers have privacy policies that say what you do on our computers is our business. So there may be no privacy.
I'm not asking you to hypothecate here, but an employer might be able to deploy an AI tool to sit resident on top of the network and sniff or watch employee internet usage, for example.
Maybe so.
And alert HR if they're doing something untoward.
Sure. That's good.
Okay.
That's good.
Interesting. And that would not be an invasion of privacy.
Well, it might feel like an invasion of privacy. As you say, it's all academic until you get sued. Yeah. So monitoring and employers are also using artificial intelligence for pay decisions, pay raises based on productivity and recommendations for promotions based on the employee's job performance, analytics. One study found that 60% of managers are using artificial intelligence to determine who should get pay raises and promotions.
That's interesting, Jacob. So what data are they using to make that decision? Are they just feeding in like in a law firm, billable hours? I mean, what are the metrics they're using to feed into the AI to make that decision? You know?
I suppose it depends on what task the employee is doing. If you're a salesman, the manager could be plugging in their completed sales, cold calls, maybe disciplinary history. Have they had any write-ups? And to determine, who would be effective, who would thrive in a elevated role. But sure, in the law firm, you could plug in billable hours, marketing hours, and then see, hey, is this candidate ready for a promotion?
That doesn't undo the need for human oversight, right? I mean, ultimately, the HR manager, VP of HR, is going to make that decision. I assume that the goal would be to use this as just a tool relative to how much of a raise that person would get.
Sure, because with employees, only so much can be captured in a file, right? You could try, but it's difficult to document an employee's interpersonal skills or other things that may not show up in a metric or a statistic.
Right.
And so I do think that human oversight is necessary to look at those and make those decisions.
So we haven't reached the point yet where you get your annual performance review and you get an email that says, sorry, Claude has said you only get a 3% raise this year or something like that.
Right.
There still should be some human oversight.
In my opinion, I think there should be human oversight.
You know what occurs to me, Jacob, is that, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Correct.
The old computer thing. And if the employer rather, doesn't have good data, right, to feed in to the AI, then you're going to get garbage out.
Right.
So that to me would suggest if we're going to use these AI tools, I would encourage my clients to have very good data keeping, retention, and record keeping practices.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And it goes to emphasize the importance of HR documenting appropriately and making sure that they are putting the right information into the AI system to get that good output.
Right.
Yeah. So, and this one I think is kind of uncomfortable. We talked about using AI to determine who should be promoted, but what about using AI to determine who should be let go? Employers are doing this, and I've got kind of two instances here, right? So we've got employers using AI to determine who should be let go from employment, and that's kind of the inverse of who should be promoted, right? You could put in all their statistics and analytics and have AI make a list of who we should let go. But also, and this is kind of what everybody talks about with AI, right, is employees getting let go because the employer is adopting AI, right? So I Googled, what employees or what companies have laid off people because of AI. And I found that Block, which I believe is Square, they do the, like when you go to the coffee shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Square,
Yeah. So they laid off 40% of their workforce and attributed it to AI. And then Oracle recently laid off 21,000 workers. So AI usage it can be beneficial for employees, but also we see some companies reducing force because of AI.
So that's no longer just an anecdote.
Correct.
You're seeing hard data as an employment lawyer saying that companies really are reducing workforce and replacing. I also read anecdotally that some of those displaced human employees are actually being hired back now. Right.
Well, as we discussed earlier, maybe the promise of AI, maybe the effects are not quite living up to what was promised. Right. So we may see these mass layoffs, but then we may see mass hirings again if it doesn't work out.
That's exactly right.
Right. So we've talked about, the AI use throughout the employment relationship. And I just want to highlight a few risks for employers for using AI. So we've talked about discrimination a little bit. The algorithm that we use to filter resumes and filter candidates, that could be biased. It could produce discriminatory candidate lists to the HR manager. I also highlight here inconsistent discipline. So you can imagine an employee who is having some performance issues, and you want to ask Claude what the performance improvement plan should be. And Claude may recommend a performance improvement plan that you put that employee on. Well, if you take an identical employee and Claude produces a different performance improvement plan or suggests terminating that employee's employment, that also sets an employer up for a risk of a discrimination claim, right? When we have two similar employees who are similarly situated, but we're treating them different, it could give rise to a discrimination claim. And as we've discussed, pointing the finger at Claude isn't going to give the employer a defense for that. I've also highlighted here bad advice. We've talked a little bit about how AI can hallucinate things. And so when HR puts in, who should I promote? There's no guarantee that Claude's going to get that answer right.
And it would not be a defense.
Would not be a
To
defense.
say, well, Claude told me to do it.
Right. Claude told me to give you 3% raise. Yep.
So digressing just a little bit, could you, Jacob, with your background, could you write the Title VII compliant prompt to feed into Claude and say, hey, Claude, here are the evaluation criteria. You base it on Title VII because you're a smart employment lawyer. Is something like that reasonable to reduce the chances of Claude getting it wrong?
I think you could try. I think, if those sources, if Claude searches the internet, he may find good enough Title VII framework to produce a result that would maybe comply with Title VII, right? Maybe. But that's where I think the human interaction is crucial, right? As an employment lawyer, we would want the HR manager to run that by us, right? Even regardless of what Claude says, maybe get a second opinion from a lawyer.
The reason I asked that question, Jacob, is because in the past 2 weeks, I've probably had, 15 new clients call and say, I used AI to create this thing, purely AI, everything from an employment environment operating system to gadgets and things and inventions, all just using AI. So they put something into Claude and Claude spat this thing out and they come to me and say, hey, I want to turn this into a business. Well, that's great. But again, I think the overuse of the AI modality to solve all of our problems for us, I see problems with it in my practice as an IP lawyer. I know you probably are seeing problems with that, AI only mindset in an HR environment.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and the law is complicated, right? Especially in the employment relationship. I think, Title VII can be complicated in instances. I think, for example, the Americans with Disability Act, that gets really complicated when we start talking about accommodations and reasonable accommodations and the interactive process with the employee. I think those issues are big enough that they need the human judgment call. And also, employees are workers, right? And so I have a general opinion that, humans should interact with humans, and I don't want to use AI to guide my decision-making process as it relates to an employee, right?
Right. Well, your comment about humans interacting with humans is interesting. It's a little bit of a sociological question, but are you finding any of your HR or employer clients encouraging employees to stay remote, maybe not to come into the workplace? You know what I mean? I mean, it's sort of a remote work question, but if you can have a remote worker and maybe move them to part-time and have some of that work done by AI, you see what I mean? Are you seeing any sort of a benefit or employers moving to that kind of a mindset?
I have not personally seen employers moving to that mindset. I think remote work, I think we're kind of coming down off the remote work high, I guess. I think people are recognizing that the human-to-human interaction is really crucial, especially for young workers, right? People who are entering the workforce. It's hard to be mentored from an AI tool, right? So that human-to-human interaction, especially with people with more experience, I think that's critical for younger workers.
Because I could see how it would be tempting for an employer to say to a new hire, okay, you've been to orientation, here's your cubicle, right? And now here are your tasks. And without a lot of human oversight, just inevitably, entropy is going to suggest that they're going to use Claude because it's the path of least resistance or some AI tool, right? So I can see your point about the need for that human interaction, that human oversight,
right?
Because otherwise, everything flows downhill toward Claude,
right?
Because it's easy,
right? I also think one other risk that's worth noting about employers using AI are the privacy concerns. So, information that we put into an AI tool, whether it be ChatGPT or Claude, that information is no longer confidential or private. You've disclosed that to a third-party vendor. And there are some significant risks that come along with that. For example, some courts, we know about the attorney-client privilege, right? Some courts are saying that information that you put into ChatGPT is not protected by the attorney-client privilege. And so that may be discoverable, that may be admissible later on. So important to consider when employers are putting in sensitive information, right? Maybe an employee's background information, maybe an employee's job performance and disciplinary history, putting that into a third-party AI system may have some significant confidentiality and privacy concerns.
Interesting. And so if that employee later files a lawsuit against the employer, all of that stuff fed into the AI is potentially discoverable in that litigation.
It could be, yeah.
Well, and that would be bad for the employer.
Right.
Right.
Right. So we've talked about the employer's usage. I want to kind of jump to employees' usage. And I think it's interesting to start with prospective employees, right? Job applicants. People using AI to draft a cover letter, people using AI to draft a resume. I found this interesting that 20% of recruiters would reject a candidate who had an AI-generated resume or cover letter. And then 15% of these managers said that candidates shouldn't use AI at any stage of the job application process. And so if you are a job candidate, I think it's worth recognizing that these HR managers, recruiters, they can spot AI use in a resume or a cover letter. And some see it as a red flag. Some see it as we won't hire you. So it's just worth having an awareness of it.
Yeah. Is there liability to the employer for wrongfully concluding that a cover letter was AI generated or a resume was AI generated and not hiring that person?
So I don't know that there would be any liability for that. I'm not sure, but it depends on the facts, right? Right.
This cover letter and resume are clearly AI generated in contravention of our stated no AI policy.
Right.
We're not hiring that guy.
Right. Well, I don't think that AI usage is a protected class, right? So if
that's a great takeaway. AI usage is not a protected class.
Right. So if the employee wanted to file or the candidate wanted to file a suit and say, you discriminated against me for using AI, I don't know that would go anywhere. Right. It's unprotected. So, yeah. So I found that interesting. And I think there's a difference between having AI draft the cover letter in its entirety versus proofreading and maybe making small revisions for tone or edits or grammar.
And I think I'm hearing you say that there's no prohibition on the employer saying from the beginning, clearly stating AI submissions not accepted or something.
Sure. Yeah. Right? You could put that. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about current employee AI use. I just highlighted this chart. Well, let's see. So we just talked about prospective employees using it, right? But we've also talked about how HR managers are using it to filter resumes and send the manager a list of qualified candidates. And so I just have this question about, AI use may be a red flag when an employer is looking at a candidate, but that employer may be using AI to filter those candidates. Are those two things consistent with one another? Looking down on AI use from the candidate, but also using it yourself. And I just pose that as a question to maybe think about.
It's funny because very hot right now in the trade publications, this notion of Claude has begun to watermark its outputs. And that's a whole thing. We could talk an hour about the Claude watermarking and what it really is. But now we're making a little bit easier to determine if there's been AI usage. And as you know, Jacob, there are a lot of laws are coming online. California law came online August 2nd, requiring the disclosure of the use of AI and watermarking in certain media. And so there's more and more of that. So maybe ultimately, from the HR perspective, it might be a little bit easier going forward for an HR manager to tell if AI has been used,
right?
Because of these evolving laws,
right? And some say they could spot it, right, just from having read it over and over again. But like you say, some AI tools, Claude specifically, is starting to put that out there and say, this is AI affirmatively from its end. Yeah. So let's get to current employee AI use. I found this interesting. So 1/3 of employees say that their organization is taking action on AI. And we have this chart here of who's using AI. We've got frontline and production workers, but clearly white collar is the most prominent use of AI in the workforce. And what are they using it for? Well, they're generating ideas, they're consolidating information, they're automating basic tasks and identifying problems. So So I use AI I have a to-do list, and I used AI to create it automatically flags, whether green, yellow, or red based on the due date of what my to-do list is, so that I can just look at it and have that quick visual of, I got to put some attention to this today. So I think it's a really helpful tool for employees to use, and you can use it in tons of different ways. I mean, I can't imagine, or I can't sit here and try to describe all the ways which an employee might find AI beneficial in their work. But it does come with some risks. So I have some risks here highlighted of what risks might an employee face by using AI. And I think this one's interesting. It's trade secret protection. You're familiar with the trade secret, of course. For those of you that are not familiar with a trade secret, at a high level, it's something that is secret and is valuable because it's secret, right? So a famous example is like the Coca-Cola formula or the KFC spice recipe and blend, right? Those are locked up in a vault somewhere. Nobody knows them. And they're valuable. So what happens if an employee who knew the Coke formula put the formula into ChatGPT and said, how can I make this better? What ingredient could I add to this? That formula may no longer be protected because they've disclosed it. They've gotten rid of its secrecy. And this is key for employees because many employers have handbooks that require employees to keep confidential information confidential. And so, maybe an employee might be disciplined based on what they put into ChatGPT.
As a practical example, Jacob, I used to work in a high technology company where we probably had, 500,000 signed NDAs probably. And there's no way that the workforce can be aware of what's confidential under an NDA and what's not. So I tell my clients, the odds are pretty good that if you have any NDAs in your company, when you prompt an AI, you're probably violating one of those NDAs, right?
Right.
So not only is trade secret status potentially lost, but you can potentially get sued for breach of contract,
right? Because
you violated an NDA,
right?
All true,
right? And so, you could be disciplined for violating either the contract or the employer's handbook. This is a study that I found. One study found that 64% of employees feel overloaded by the constant stream of new AI tools. So these tools may be beneficial. They may increase efficiency and allow people to automate tasks. But there is evidence that it takes a strain on the employees and it stresses them out. I mean, especially without a policy and without these trainings, right? So if an employer trains employees and is taking a proactive approach on what AI tools they may be using, that may help to reduce the stress.
Interesting. So if an employer is going to drink the Kool-Aid and allow AI usage, it sounds like it might make sense to say, instead of saying, pick from one of these 500 AI tools, give them a menu of pre-approved AI tools. Is that right?
I think that would help bring the stress level down a little bit, right? I mean, there's so many tools out there, right? And so if the employer could filter and kind of vet these tools and then present their employees with approved ones that have been vetted, that may help the employment relationship.
Now, we've got about 10 minutes left, Jacob. I don't know how far you are along in your deck. If we want to pause here and open it to questions, or at least alert the audience to start preparing their questions if they have any, do you think you might be able to sort of wind down your deck in about 5 minutes?
Yeah.
We can try that. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip ahead here, and I want to just highlight, we've talked about AI and employment relationship, and I want to just highlight, how states are responding to certain AI tools. So you mentioned this earlier. This is New York City local law. It prohibits employers and employment agencies from using an automated employment decision tool, so filtering candidates and resumes, unless the tool has been subject to a bias audit within 1 year of the use, the information about the bias audit is publicly available, and certain notices have been provided to employees or job candidates, right? So New York City has taken a clear approach of, we want disclosure. We want people to be on notice that their resume may be submitted through AI or may be run through AI. Another example here would be Illinois. This law deals with video interviews when you're recorded and then the employer submits that interview to AI to evaluate. In Illinois, the employer has to notify each applicant that AI may be used to analyze the interview. And it has to provide each applicant a statement explaining how the AI works and what it will consider. And then it has to get consent from the candidate before the interview. And I found that interesting, that the employer has to get the consent of the candidate for the interview to submit their interview through AI.
New York and Illinois. Do you think you probably didn't do a full 50-state survey, but it's your sense that there are other states that have similar laws?
I think there are some, yeah. I think states are moving in that direction. We'll just have to see kind of how it shakes out over time. I think it's relatively new, but New York City, that law was, I believe, 2021. So they were on the forefront of that. Yeah. So let me just skip ahead here to some key takeaways.
Please.
So AI can be used to support every stage of the employment relationship, the hiring, the management decisions, and the termination or the end of the employment relationship. But I think AI should be used to enhance and not replace human decision-making. I think human decision-making is crucial at each of those stages, the beginning of the relationship, throughout the working relationship, and even at the end. And then effective governance is essential for responsible AI use. As we've talked about bias audits and certain risks of discriminatory results, you've got to monitor the AI to make sure that it's being used responsibly. So for an employer, those are the three takeaways I would highlight.
That's very good, Jacob. Well, with that, I'll look back to Gene and to the moderation crew here. Do we have any questions in the chat that have come up?
Most recently, there was a question about how the law differs for staffing agencies versus regular employees and the use of AI to screen. Any comments on that?
Shane, I'm not sure that the audience heard that. The question was, are there differences between the laws affecting staffing agencies as opposed to actual just employers? I don't know, Jacob. What are your thoughts?
So off the top of my head, I think staffing agencies are treated a little differently, and different states may have different laws on staffing agencies. So I don't know that I can come out and say how the law treats them on these things versus employers. But I would imagine that they're probably treated pretty similarly. If a staffing agency uses AI to maybe suggest a candidate for certain roles, there could be some risk there for the staffing agency in the same way that there would be for the employer who uses it to screen the resumes.
Folks, thank you. We have only 7 minutes remaining, so please just shout out, just ask a question eloquently and to the point.
There was another question earlier about the employer oversight, and it was in regards to device usage. If an employer does not provide a device for you to use, you're using, your own laptop. What do the laws look like for that particular scenario?
So personal device usage versus employer provided device usage. I think generally there is a higher expectation of privacy when it's your own personal device. Though it depends on what you're using that personal device for. If you're using the personal device to access highly confidential records or files within the employer's system, then the privacy policy that they have may reduce your expectation of privacy in that, because they want to monitor, who's accessing these highly confidential files. Where are they going? Is anybody sending them out? But in general, private devices have a higher privacy attached to them.
Okay, another question that just came in says AI analysis of employee productivity can go well beyond strict metrics. I have used AI to consume entire Slack histories between team members and then ran psycholinguistic and semantic analysis on those interactions. The result revealed many soft skill patterns and observations that might not be obvious to a human or might be difficult for a human to describe effectively. Does that sound positive, problematic, and or legal?
It's a good question.
Did an AI write that question?
I'm just throwing that out to the audience. That was a great question. Did an AI write that? Okay, Jacob, sorry.
Does it sound legal? Well, I don't know all the facts, but if we're using, it was a Slack conversation, I think. Slack on a work device, I think the employer can read through those in the same way that my emails are not private on my work email, or if I use Microsoft Teams, I think the employer can read those. Is it positive or problematic?
Well, you're thinking, I'm going to
yeah.
guess and say it depends on the level of disclosure.
Right.
It sounds golden to me in terms of assembling and analyzing a mass of data, but I would think there'd be some kind of disclosure. No?
Yeah, I mean, it could be positive. I mean, it sounds like this came up with some soft skills on the employee, and it was positive. But I would maybe want to know if all of my conversation history was going to be read and analyzed and synthesized, and I think I'd want to know that.
Me too. Good question.
Okay, I got another good one for you. You emphasize keeping a human in the loop for consequential employment decisions, but as AI systems become more capable, there's a risk that the human reviewer simply rubber stamps the model's recommendation. From a legal perspective, what constitutes meaningful human oversight rather than merely nominal human involvement? And if the human routinely follows the AI recommendation, does liability effectively start looking more like automated decision making?
That's a good question too. Yeah. So when I say that I think the human interaction is crucial, I think there's a lot of, in these consequential employment decisions, I think there's a lot of sympathy and empathy that kind of go into those decisions. And I don't know how good AI is at empathizing. Rubber stamping, I think rubber stamping the AI decision may put even more risk for the employer, right? Because as we've talked about, the employer can't say, oh, ChatGPT told me to do it. And rubber stamping starts looking a lot like that, right? So I think if the human is there and reviews the recommendation and engages in maybe an independent analysis of it, I think that'd probably be the best practice. But legally, I think the employer still has the risk.
I agree, because you use the term meaningful human interaction. That's not from a case. There's no statute or case that defines meaningful human interaction. I know I'm going to ask you, right? I'm assuming that's true.
Right. Yeah.
So it's one of those AI unknowns, but you would advise your clients to have a degree of human interaction. I would say use a requisite amount of human interaction in these processes so that there is at least some human oversight, human involvement, because it's not defensible to say, as we agreed, that the AI made the decision.
Correct.
We don't know how much that is because no court has told us, but I would recommend that there at least be, a reasonable amount of human interaction still in these processes.
Right. I think so. I think if you are going to look to AI for consequential employment decisions, I think the recommendation should at most be a factor in your decision making. But I don't think personally that the recommendation should be elevated to more than what it is, right? It's a recommendation.
Very good. And I think that actually formally concludes our time together today. So, Gene, unless you have any parting comments, I think we agreed you would not.
That's correct. So that's absolutely amazing. Thank you, both gentlemen, Brett and Jacob, for coming out and doing this for us. Very unique opportunity to hear from the horse's mouth about some of these intricacies of AI-related litigation and HR related things that are probably on the minds of many, but not many speak up. So I really thank you for doing this. I think it was very informative. I do want to announce to those that are on the call and those that may not have, that were not able to make it, but maybe hear the second hand, you will be coming back on September 18th and offering another free. I don't want to call it a consultation. It's a webinar. It's an open conversation, but I think it's going to be another interesting topic: new digital battlefield, AI, and litigation. Probably some degree of continuity from this one, so people don't dismiss one. Just mark your calendars for September 18th. With that, I want to thank everyone who came out and joined us today. Once again, to the speakers, special thanks. Hopefully, we'll have the recording and the materials available within the next few days and circulated with those that could not make it today. I want to thank you once again, Brett, Jacob. Thank you greatly, and whoever facilitated this and helped with organizing and logistics. Alexa, off the cuff, I remember the name, and everyone else. Thank you as well. And Kim.
Thank you, Gene, and thanks to our audience. And on behalf of Jacob and me and our law firm, Hawley Truxell, please have a great day or a good afternoon, and best of luck as you're out there in that crazy AI wilderness.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Jacob, thank you.
See you guys in September. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, everyone.